And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and ask Commissioner Banks, if he would, please, an invitation, please stand and proceed.
Dear Father God, we thank you today for your loving kindness and your multitude of mercies, and you continue to keep us safe. And we pray for this commission, pray for our community, that we come together as one and have peace. We ask this in your son Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, we've got, Commission, again, there's public comment as before we get into the discussion. Seeing as this is a workshop, I'm gonna go ahead, if everyone is okay, I'm gonna do public comment too after we have our discussion so that they can respond to everyone. Okay with that, or do you want to go ahead and open up public comment? We have any objections to that? Yes,
Mayor, I don't have my agenda in front of me. I don't know what I did with it. How is it listed on the agenda?
public comment and then general fund workshop and then adjourn.
I'd be a little more comfortable if we asked if there's anyone here who can't stay or.
I'll go ahead at this time and I'm gonna open up public comment. If you have anything that you would like to say, please come forward.
George Miller, 100 Shore Drive, Crescent City. I would respectfully request the public comments be after the business, because we'll have, it will generate, Mr. Rudd's presentation, I'm sure will generate a lot of questions. So
Okay.
I hope they consider
Thank you. We have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna go ahead at this time, I'm gonna make public comment, close public comment, and move additional public comment to the end of discussion. So with that, Charles, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Karen, if you would please make note that Bobby Pickens is present. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, or good afternoon. I'm going to do this from out here so I can just, I don't have a PowerPoint for you. We'll have that for you later in the process. First of all, I'll acknowledge that I'm a little low energy today, so you understand. I had some kidney stones surgically removed over the weekend just to be a little proactive in my health care, and I'm still recovering from that, but I'll answer all your questions as best as I can. And today I really look at this as kind of a pre-workshop workshop. We could have waited till later till we had more prep done, but I wanted to get your minds working, looking about our revenue and expenses and the constraints that we have and so forth. We've had a lot of conversations already about increasing payroll and adding positions and all that sort of thing. So it'd be good for you to see kind of where we're projecting the revenue will be and what we're looking at for expenditures and increases that we've already experienced or anticipated. So I'll go through that and then take your questions as we go along. Start with just the revenue and talk about that. This year's, first let me talk about the format. I also want to mention, any disparaging comments about our financial condition over the past is not directed towards Dale and his staff. Dale's doing an excellent job and it's worked out. I looked at the last 2 years I've been here, and with all the turnover we had with the Clarion and ourselves, we basically have a new finance director every 3 months. And each new finance director didn't know where the other person had left off or what they were doing or why, and kind of had to start over and figure out what was going on. And Dale's hopefully the last in that line is getting us worked out, along with some additional help and our auditors to get everything all streamlined with modern general government accounting principles. So with that, what we did was we got our valuation from tax collector's office, and we're expecting to collect about a 23% increase in property tax values this year. The way this is, we have 2021, you'll have figures later on. that's the last audited year. We're currently completing the audit for 2022, so that has to be listed as an unaudited number. So those numbers are subject to change when we get the audit. Then we have a line where what we project this year will finish out as, and then what we actually budgeted. So we budgeted $751,229 in ad valorem. That was 95% of ad valorem. But it looks like, based on what we've already collected, and then I looked ahead at last year's final quarter, kind of what came in to project, I think probably 800,000 will come in by the end of the fiscal year. That's just a projection. So based on the projection, and only taking a 20% increase to be conservative in value, we're estimating $960,000 revenue for property taxes. So the rest of those income lines, as you'll see, we'll go through, we looked at what we projected this year and used that number rather than, in most cases, rather than what we budgeted last year, because we saw slight increases in many of them. So, and there's a wide variety of these taxes. Our total tax revenue, we had budgeted $1,088,738. We think it'll come in at about 1.15. So we're budgeting 1.3 for next year.
Can I ask a question? Charleston, by the way, this is something like Judy West would say, so pretend it's not me, pretend it's Judy. Would it be more comfortable for you to sit down and let somebody else do the clicker?
Yeah, I'll sit down, Kate, when I need to. Thank you.
So, I just wasn't sure in making the projection, which column figures you used, the budgeted for 2023 or where you think it's actually gonna come in?
We use the projected, where we think
Okay.
it'll be.
Okay, so you use the, more real numbers, which also happen to be a little higher.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
So in licensing and permits, and this is just a wild, this number just depends on growth, depends on folks that come in and get permits and so forth. So we had budget 8,800. We're thinking it'll be about 7,500, so we went with the lower number of 7,500. These intergovernmental, which are our franchise fees and so forth, and our agreements with DOT, they pay us to do work. We had budgeted 338,000. Looks like it's going to come in at about 371.9, so we went with that number. A little bit of an increase there.
Should we keep that with that 371.9, or are we comfortable keeping that at pretty much 100% of what we brought in this year? Or should we back that down a little bit? I'm just asking.
We can look at that. It's, like our DOT agreements increased a little bit. We get little bumps in revenue. It does continue to go up. And then these are our charges for service. These admin fees are our interfund transfers. So as an example, our gas department doesn't have its own accounting department and its own billing and so forth. So they all pay a calculated contribution to the general fund. So that's what this revenue is, plus the rent we receive for the properties that we rent out. And then surplus sale of equipment. We're going to sell, hopefully we're going to sell a bunch of stuff right here at the end of this year. We don't anticipate right now what will be sold next year. So that's, again, that number was budgeted 469, went down. We projected to be down a little bit, so we went with the lower number. Fines and forfeitures, very little money there. Actually, because of code enforcement, we had a very active code enforcement year of kind of trying to wrap things up. Pam has really been going through all the old, we got new software, cleaning things up, bringing things for you. So we're anticipating about $20,000 in code enforcement revenue, whereas we had budgeted $2,500. So we don't, for next year, we don't know there'll be that much So we backed off of that number, about half that number. So, whereas we expect this year about $21,000, we put it at 11,500 for next year. And that's just a kind of an estimate. We really have no way to calculate what that number will be. So I highlighted the investment income, this $33,000. That's if you approve the investment policy and we put about half of our cash that's just sitting, we invest it. We had projected about $33,000 in interest after a year. So we put that line there. So that would be a new revenue source for us. That would be negated if we were to reduce other revenue sources. So it's an opportunity. We talked about that's enough money to buy a truck each year or something like that, just to show you where that would come in under investment income. This is miscellaneous, just revenues, grants. We finished out the Fletcher Park grant. There's no more ARPA money coming, and so forth. So I think the only thing in there is miscellaneous revenue. So we just projected that as $1,000.
Do we know of the 237,937? What was, do we know what that was?
Miscellaneous revenue.
Was that for the road possibly out here on Central? Was that?
That could have been the very end of the MSCOP grant, the DOT
That's
grant.
what- okay.
Yeah. We'd have to research that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. So did I miss something, or did you say what the miscellaneous revenue was budgeted for the current year, the 30,000? Did I not hear you say that? Or
He said with miscellaneous revenue, they're budgeting at 1,000.
I'm sorry, say that again?
1,000.
Right, but with the 30,000 that was budgeted this year, and then it was actually 900.
Where are we? Okay.
It's in the same line as the 237. You just go over to, we're actually projected
Oh.
for 900. Do we know what that is?
Oh, the miscellaneous for $30.
Does that include things like paying for for copies or things of that nature?
We'd have to look that up. I don't know what we had lumped into miscellaneous revenue.
Okay.
No telling.
Right, the mayor's right, that was a pretty large, amount to put in the miscellaneous for 2022, which is of course unaudited. Okay.
That might have been the FERDAP. If we get the FERDAP grant back, it's about that much money. They may have been anticipating where we'll account for the FERDAP reimbursement when we get that grant money back.
I don't know.
Yeah, because oftentimes we have to pay that out and then
We pay it in front and then
we
we
pay
get,
it on the front end and they reimburse us back for it and it has to go somewhere.
that's probably what that is. So our total revenues, we had budgeted would be 2,026,000, and then we think they're gonna come in about 2,072,000. And then, so we projected 2.2 million, with the increase in, ad valorem. So approximately, $125,000 increase in revenue this year to work with. So any other questions on our revenue? Again, these are just revenue projections at this point. We still have a whole quarter for collecting, we'll be collecting revenue and updating those projections. Yeah, go ahead.
One question I always have when I'm thinking about how the commission is gonna make policy decisions on what to subtract or add to the budget is, what is our recurring revenue versus non-recurring revenue, for the year. I always like to see that, just so, you know, for example, Grant Fletcher Park, that's not gonna be there. And then to have an idea of what our, you know, fixed expenses are. So are you saying the $125,000 increase in revenue, is that a net increase or a gross increase?
When you
I
say.
don't know if that's applicable, yeah.
gross, yeah. what do you mean by net, or, I mean, we know what net and gross are, so how are you applying that here?
What I'm saying is a net increase over, just, is that recurring fund increase?
That's total revenue.
That we will have this year that we didn't have last year.
Correct. Based on these very early projections.
Okay, but then when I look at ad valorem tax, am I not adding correctly? It looks like the ad valorem tax increase is $210,000, 2024 over the current year.
208,771, right about 208,771 increase.
Okay, so how does our total revenue then increase by 125,000?
Well,
If you go through and you see other, other revenue was 117,000 projected last year, this year 1,000. So there's a huge drop there.
miscellaneous revenue, 30,000.
So there were drops here and there in the other forms of revenue.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. And back to that point, maybe the next time this kind of document is produced, it would be helpful to have the under over column, after 2024, so that, like, I did some rough calculations. It would be helpful to see that.
Okay.
What's going up, what's coming down. Because otherwise you don't. Okay, I get it now. Thank you. That really helped.
And I think you mentioned to me, this is just the very first. This hasn't got the pretty graphs in it. That doesn't have anything that.
Correct. This is very raw, just to give you kind of a sense of how tight or loose, the budget may be. This is our general fund is really just an operational budget. And I'll show you, there's very little, I would call meat or project money, like money to fix the street. We do have a little bit of that, but I'll show you that as we go through this. So this is the city commission budget. I haven't changed anything, other than we decided to move your advertising costs into your budget. We had projected last year 66,627. You always come in a little under budget because you don't all use your education money. So we left that at $1,200. We left the overall amount increased a little bit because the $5,000 advertising, that's for advertising your meeting and so forth. It made sense for us to track it that way and put it in your budget. Now, if you want to increase your training or your payroll, anything like that, that's up to you. We will be, in this case, the retirement line refers to those two former commissioners that get retirement. It's not a pension amount or anything like that, so it won't be impacted by that, those changes.
Can I, to help us follow, or can we, on the chart up there, you got it in line items.
Oh, the numbered lines?
Yeah, but the copy we have here don't have.
Yes, sir, we can make that
It
addition.
should, yes, sir.
I've been using the sheet to just
Here.
kind
Let's see, where are you? Is it the next, it's,
It would help to be able to say line 110.
well, let's see what
So we have to make
happens.
that change.
he's got numbers, we got none, that's what he's saying.
Yeah, we got numbers, we got
Yeah, we
numbers.
got none.
It's
So I've
all-
been just using my sheet.
I got numbers, I've got numbers.
I don't have numbers.
No, you don't, right next to it, here, 101, 1.
Oh, okay, I see
So
what
we know
you're saying.
exactly
Oh,
which
that's
one.
kind of like you get, like we used to have.
Yeah,
for
there you
BMAS,
go,
yeah.
it's more easy for us to follow.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We can still make that change.
Mayor, if I could,
Yes,
I have two requests. I'm so glad Commissioner Banks brought that up. Yes, having the actual number of the budget line item, And then also, usually when we get a budget, there's all these lines on the page, there's the grid lines, so that it's much easier to follow across the page. Because that is confusing. That's confusing.
We'll add that.
But I understand, and usually it's turned landscape when you do that, and this is portrait, but it makes it hard to see.
Let me ask, I want to ask a question before we get down into that, and we're asking him to do it. Before it was done on an Excel spreadsheet. So that was part of that. Is this also?
This is an Excel
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
it's an
You've
Excel.
done this on Excel also?
Yeah.
And so your final one, Dale, that's what you're doing, the final one on is the Excel as well, okay? I just want to make sure the programs, everything, okay.
But Mayor, I actually do have a substantive question about the city commission budget.
Okay.
If I may, about the training funds. I have one observation. In the current year, the training funds have not been fully used. I think I'm gonna come out, last year I used almost all of mine, I think I will this year. I think there's some money I've spent that's either I haven't claimed or it hasn't been captured.
Yeah, this doesn't show the Florida League of Cities Conference expenditures included.
Right, so I think I'm right at it, but just, we've had this discussion in prior commissions, I mean, way back to when the late Marcus Hardy served, that actually, if you're really going to go to a conference, $1,200 is not that adequate, especially the years when it's in, South Florida, when it's in Broward County. I know I don't usually claim gas. If I claimed gas, probably last year I would have gone over. I mean, there are just some costs that I absorb.
Well, you can claim food, because we can't claim food either, because you go over on food too, so anything you eat.
Well, I'm just saying, and this is something that Marcus Hardy had brought up, that is it's actually very difficult to go to a conference on that budget. And as well, there's a very beneficial training that the League of Cities does that lasts a couple days. The abbreviation is IEMO, they call it EMO. I think that stands for Institute for Elected Municipal Officials. Our former commissioner, BJ Laurie, is back there nodding his head. He did that training. I didn't do it, partly because COVID came up. That is incredibly beneficial. And I really think the city would benefit if we made the funds available for a commissioner to do that once. But I did an online short course, I can't even remember, I had to pay for it. That was 7 hours that the League of Cities offered. Each module was about an hour long. It covered, there was a module on budget. I found it very helpful. And it just made me realize that I think I would find the 2-day course, I think we all would, and I see Mr. Laurie back there nodding his head. So just something for us to think about as commissioners in order to be able to better know how to do our jobs, that maybe we make sure we have that funding that we need. And as well,
Can I ask a question before?
sure,
So you're asking for more funds to take classes, not more funds to pay for food and gas, right?
well, it kind of goes together. I mean, EMO is the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials, that's the 2-day training. There's a conference fee, but as well, it's an overnight thing. I don't know if they ever have it close enough for people to realistically drive back and forth. And just being practical about it, and this is one thing Commissioner Hardy pointed out, if you don't provide sufficient funds for a certain amount of gas and food, then there are some commissioners who might not be able to go.
Well, my follow-up question is, it sounds as though we, don't have plans to pay for gas and food for commissioners, correct? So where would we change that?
No, that's not, I was just
You
saying.
can claim it.
You
Okay, you
can claim it.
can.
What I was saying to her though, is if, oftentimes it's easy, if you do claim it, if you go over.
You go over.
Right,
So that's, I just wanted, in
You
my
go
brain, I
over,
wanted to
once
make
you do
sure
your
we're
room, once
understanding.
you do your room, and you do the conference fee,
Right.
you know, if you were to put anything else on top of that, you go over. So oftentimes when we do any of these, we have to pick up our own food.
Right, exactly. And for example, this past year, I went to legislative conference in Tallahassee, I went to the redevelopment conference, and I went to the annual meeting conference, which all these conferences have training. So, yeah, there was no question I had to pay part of it. But as well, I guess we've asked this in prior years, for 2023, if I do go over in like my hotel and my conference fees, if the commission would approve, I don't know what my outstanding total is gonna be that I'm paying for myself. But if the commission would consider approving some reimbursement out of unused funds from other commissioners, I would appreciate it. And I don't have any figures.
Well, so maybe for this budget, we can move forward instead of being 1,200, and I'm just throwing a number out here, maybe we should make it 1,500 for, again.
Right, we should get some figures, yeah.
Very expensive, very expensive.
So how was that accomplished? By motion, by?
Not right now.
I'm not saying that now, but I'm saying how
Okay,
was that
so
accomplished?
I think we should make a note of that.
We'll make a note of it and he can adjust it and then we'll bring it back and vote on it when we vote on the budget. Yes?
Yeah, whole registration is $300 and it covers, instructional costs, materials, refreshment breaks and lunch on Friday and Saturday.
It doesn't cover your hotel, which.
It does not cover your hotel,
They
but
have a contract rate at the hotel.
I'm just giving them an idea, BJ, of how much the actual.
Just the registration,
cost.
just the registration.
And
And so,
the next one's in Tampa.
and so what we end up doing is we're having to pick and choose, like, you know, I did, League of Cities the first year, the next year I did, Florida, FRA.
Yeah.
I did FRA, I did, and then this year I'm having to pay for some of my own. So yeah, I mean, it is,
Right, and then, one thing that I brought up in a prior year, and we did not choose to do it, is when we go to a CRA-related conference, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to fund at least the registration fee out of the CRA budget, if we have enough money in the CRA, because we're training for that.
Yeah, your board members, so that would be appropriate.
Right, if we can do it, so that's just another note for when we get to the CRA budget.
And then, we used to, when a commission didn't go, the other commissioner could, use some of their funds.
and that's what she's asking, that's
Yeah,
what
right.
Commissioner
Yeah,
DeVito's
right.
asking, if she goes over.
Cause, Commissioner Vito basically goes to, all of it, she bring back a bunch of good information. She really does.
Yes, sir, I made those notes.
Yeah, so I really,
Anything else on the commission budget?
Well, I don't know why you have to put the advertising in our budget, I think it should go back in administration, for the city manager.
So the next item is something new we're proposing, more typical in cities. There's a city manager's office, which houses, sometimes they have public information office, and the clerk, and, so in our case, we had city manager's office and the finance department combined as finance and administration. And so this is what it would look like if we were to split those apart, where the clerk and I would be in the city manager's office, and then the assistant city manager / finance director, accounts payable and payroll, HR, would be in the finance department. So, what you see, you don't see a history for a city manager because it was all combined into one, department. So there's my salary and the clerk's salary, and then all the various, HR expenditures, plus all the supplies, travel, and so forth. And then we have the finance department, which has the history of the combined department. So, I know it makes it difficult to compare, one year over the next, because the last just couple of years, we We were budgeting for 5 people, but actually we had 4 and a consultant, which came out of another line and salaries and so forth. So now we've adjusted where we have the David's salary and then Jill and Sheila's salaries, and then all the associated FICA, Medicare, retirement, and so forth. These retirement expenditures also reflect, currently we contribute 5% to retirement, and we've got a proposal for you to allow us to switch to the Florida retirement system, which I think requires an 8 or is it 8.5?
8%.
8.5% contribution. So we went ahead and showed you those numbers, or we would be contributing more, but the employees would then be able to contribute to their own retirement fund, which they cannot do right now. So when you get down to the bottom, so in this budget, we took out a Clarion, those costs, which was the 99,900. That was a Clarion, and I think that was a little bit of the salary, the firm that we hired to do the salary survey, was professional services, so all that went away. But we do have a little bit of professional services left there.
Ben, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't see the 99,000.
It's line 172.
Go down to professional services.
Okay.
We had a Clarion there, so we have less there, I mean, more in payroll this year. We built positions up in payroll, because we now have a finance director again. So the total, 278.8 added to the city manager's office, which is 226. So overall increase, over budgeted last year it's almost $100,000, because we got rid of the professional services and put salaries in there. This budget also represents, I don't know what the percentage for,
What percent our liability insurance on it?
It doubled, no, not a liability, our property, was it our property that doubled?
yeah. So we have doubling of those insurance costs, is also reflected in these numbers when you see that.
And that's municipalities, I think, pretty much across the board, because Willakas did the same, they're doubled
Yeah,
as
it's all
well.
through, Core League.
Well, yes.
Wait a minute, what, I can't see, what is because these pages aren't numbered. I'm having trouble finding the finance page. What does it say at the very top of the finance page, if you don't mind?
Yeah, on the left side is expenditures, then it says finances, the second row. It's after a pretty blank page.
Okay,
And then Wiggles at the bottom of it.
that's not what I'm about, maybe I lost it.
Did you find it?
No, but
Do you want me to print one out?
just keep, no, that's okay. We could do that later.
It looks like we had on there,
Oh, wait, I got it.
that for the IT support, and we've come back down to 5. Is that because we were doing the complete switch over to Edmonds and getting the training back and forth for the IT support on that?
No, that line is not Edmonds, that line is, all the computer crossover training we've been doing, new
All the,
firewall and server and all that. We
Okay.
hope that we're finished with all that. We're trying to settle into a monthly contract for services, plus we have a lot of subscriptions for Adobe and Illustrator, for Microsoft 360 and this, all the software that we have. We pay monthly subscriptions, and then we have a monthly IT service that we pay for. This also may change a little bit with staff salaries. Jill has let us know she's going to be leaving us at the first of the year, so we have an opportunity to train someone. We'd like to have someone in to train with her, so we don't have that stop for weeks, no one in the position, things back up. where someone just takes right over, she's trained them, and we have a smooth transition. So that'll add a little bit to that payroll, for that line. We'll estimate that when we revise this. So the only big changes in these two budgets, city manager was moving a Clarion out and those services. Even the ones you've approved for this year, the additional finance help will be done by the end of this fiscal year, and we won't have those in the budget next year. Clean all that out. We are gonna take on a payroll, which is very minimal each month, to attend our payroll processes, to free up, Sheila's time to do more in the finance department. That's a minimal expense.
Okay, any other questions on this?
I do have questions now that I've found my page, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so to be clear, going back down to that 172, that's professional services. So that included Clarion. Where was our audit expense in all this? Is it divided up into the different departments?
We'll see right above that, audit fees.
Okay.
That is divided among cross funds, even
Oh, boy.
water, gas, wastewater, everybody's shared in the audit because everybody gets audited.
Right, okay, the only issue I have with that is, to me, there's a couple things that would be easier for the commission and the public to understand and get the big picture on. Some things that are divided between the different departments, like audit fees, and I think insurance is also divided to some extent.
Yes, we share that.
Right, we share that. Would be worthy of a footnote to give the total for the city budget that we're paying this year versus last year. Because I think you don't see and understand the impact as much. And some of these things have, like insurance, that has long range, impacts, and as well, I think the audit is, by our contract, is gonna go up. And then the other thing that, in prior years, we've had a footnote on, we always listed, like where it says salaries, at the top, like salaries, and then staff salaries, there would be a footnote that would say what the position was, and then staff salaries, there would be a footnote, and it would say, like clerk, payroll clerk, whatever. It would actually say, because when you see salaries here, number one, you don't know exactly how many salaries that is. And, well, it's good to know how many from a department. And then the only other footnote I would really request, and this is both for us and members of the public who are gonna be looking at our budget, it would be nice to have a footnote that explains, what the actual, like, to do a little comparison between, what the prior year was for the city manager's salary, so they could do a current year to past year comparison. And to also know what's being, those items that you say that are being dropped out, that people would realize and understand that there's some things we did pay for that we will not be spending money on this year.
The footnote didn't have their salaries listed. The footnote just would say.
The position.
The position,
It's just
yeah.
position.
No, that's what I'm saying, not the actual
Okay.
salary amount, but just how many people.
Yeah, it's like one city manager and finance director, two city clerk, payroll and insurance clerk.
That's what I'm talking about. And that would go for, that was
Sure.
across the board for all the departments.
Okay.
So that was all I have there. Thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
Going to legal?
Yes. So our legal, contractual fees, and Bobby has already informed me that it will be an increase this year, which I think we need to go out, we'll do an RFP. We'll add that to the agenda for Thursday night for approval to issue an RFP for those services. It's not reflected here. Also, we do anticipate with the 2 recalls that are going on, we'll have additional outside legal counsel, which could be in the range of $40,000 to $50,000, depending on how long those go on. So we put that money here, so it doesn't have to be a surprise later. But again, this, as we go through, by the time we adopt this second hearing, we'll know the process, progress of that. If it's continuing, we know that the bills are continuing. If it has stopped, we'll know that amount. So we'll be able to tweak this as we go.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
About that, so, and Bobby might want to weigh in. Where I saw the line that said outside legal counsel, I kind of figured you were talking about recall. To me, there would be a more accurate way to say it, because we're not really hiring outside legal counsel. That, Bobby, doesn't that have a different kind of meaning? Like, I mean, if, for example, if we, I don't know, if you're doing foreclosures or something, or I don't know what it is, but we're not actually hiring anyone, we're making reimbursement, which is a little bit different.
Yeah, that is correct. So it probably is not outside legal counsels. It's more,
Add a new line.
yeah,
Or you
because
could-
outside legal counsel to me would be, we got sued by somebody that was over our ability at Holmes and Young, and we had to hire an expert in eminent domain or something crazy like that.
That's what I'm saying, right, we're not actually hiring them, it's a cost that we have to pay, and then, I hate to say this, but I thought I heard the supervisor of elections say, it might have been at a canvassing board meeting, that we would not get charged for
It's they're obligated to pay, the county is obligated to pay for all these elections
Yeah.
that they
Okay.
pay for them automatically. But one thing I wanted to ask you, so basically you need another line, so what would you like the outside legal counsel figure approximately to be? And then the $50,000 would just drop down and you would call that,
What would we call that? I don't think we need, the 2 years that we've been the city attorney, we've never spent any of the outside legal. I don't even, I mean, you may want to keep a placeholder there. I think it used to be $10,000 or $12,000, but we've never used any of it. So it may be better just if something like that were to come up, then we would just have to move money around. I wouldn't anticipate that we would have any crazy outside legal issues. As far as the,
Well, hang on, you had mentioned one time when we sent out 3 foreclosure letters, you said that would be additional legal services to do.
yeah, that wasn't, that litigation is outside of our contract, so yeah, I guess that would be possible. But I don't have a figure because we've never,
well, I mean, what is it then? You know, it looks like it's $2,000 budgeted for 20.
I think it was whatever our contract is,
You know, I mean,
50,000 minus whatever y'all are paying us is what it's been.
well, the 50,000 would stay there for recalls, basically, because we have a group of people, about 154 people here in Crescent City, that's their game, that's what they play, and they just keep recalling people, so we just move that down. But for you, if you do have to have outside counsel to help you, that would just be another line. It would be- See what I mean?
And I think 10,000, if you put a $10,000 placeholder in it, that'd be more than
Okay.
sufficient for that.
That's all.
Legal services, just other legal services.
I just
As a
think
new
it would be
line.
other legal services,
Yeah.
because Jay had it, Jay used it,
Yeah,
Right.
he used it, and it could be, if you need to call Susan, or if you need to call somebody and they need to give you, that's where that would come in.
Yeah, because in the past history, we always had a lawyer up in Jacksonville, I just remember her name now. That is, there was certain things that our legal attorney would handle, and certain things that he would turn over to her to handle.
Okay, but Mayor, if I could, I think, let me ask Bobby, so when we consult with the attorney for our Florida League of Cities Insurance, FMIT, we don't have to pay for her services, do we, or do we?
No, we don't.
Okay, so in other words, I think the lady in Jacksonville that Commissioner Banks is talking about, I think she's hired by our insurance company. And I think in most cases, in other words, we have liability insurance through FMIT, and for example, if there's a personnel issue, then, and Bobby consults with her, I think that there's not an extra charge for that. But
Now, the little incident that we had out on Frisbee Road. Now, we had to get her to handle that, and we had to pay her.
I think maybe that's outside litigation, court litigation. I don't think we have to pay her for consultation, but for, I don't know, for a federal case, would we have to pay, Bobby?
Yeah, we didn't pay for the one involving our police department.
We didn't pay
because
for
that was-
grants, that came under that was a
And
federal.
we're not paying for the one that's going on right now.
With Brett Pearson, I think.
But I guess there could be an incident where something crazy happened and we would need to seek absurd lease. And I would assume eventually she would charge, yes. So there is a scenario that would be possible.
So we could have, we'd have legal, contractual fees, outside legal counsel, which is the funds that will be available in case the scope would be beyond, Holmes and Young scope. And then we could have other legal services as a third line to handle reimbursements and that sort of thing, if that, those things come up.
Same amount, okay.
We'll do that. Okay, so noted.
Okay. Ready to move on to utility billing?
Utility billing. So you can see there's really not much change in utility billing, other than the increase in insurance liability and retirement. Get down here to the bottom.
And that retirement figure, that takes in us going up from 5 to 8.5%, correct? In lieu of,
Yes.
trying to join the,
But that could either be going to full retirement or getting our own company to boost it and let our employees contribute. So we do see an increase over the budgeted from last year of $10,000 approximately, based on those increases we see. Any questions on our utility billing? One thing in the future, Dale and I have talked a little bit about, and it's not gonna do it this year. It's typical, and everything the utility billing department does is for one of our enterprise funds, water, sewer, gas. So it brings the question, why are they in the general fund? And then we have to move money over to cover. So we'll look at that over the coming year. Can we just move all that into our enterprise funds? So you can see those funds fully, and it's not in the general fund. Okay, planning and zoning. Two things I want to point out here. We had, in the current year, we still had $5,000 left in the land development code update contract. That expand over from the previous fiscal year. And then we have just our continuing services, and we have an other line. What I have here, $8,500 on the agenda this week. I have a change order to that contract. If you want, they put together a proposal for a detailed analysis of our existing code, and then what's been proposed in graphic detail, where it was in the old code, where it is in the new code, what was added and why. Just a really detailed analysis, and that proposal is $8,500. The $2,500 in other is if you choose to go forward with the impact fee analysis study, which we have to do if we want impact fees. We talked about sharing that with the general fund and the water, those funds that would benefit from the impact fees. So the general fund's portion could be about $20,000. So I have that here accounted for with some other, yeah.
Okay.
And then I also increased the consulting fee amount, just in anticipation of growth. You know, the RV park will be under construction, some other things, and so we have to do some of that we have to inspect. So there'll be ongoing costs. We have to take it from somewhere, even though we can bill some of it to the customer. We have to take it, we have to have it in our budget somewhere. So I have increased our monthly consulting fee. Ultimately, that number gets so big, we can look at just hiring somebody that's ours full-time, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Any questions on planning and zoning?
I just have one question about really two questions, if I can. The recodification, that's with the, Florida Muni Code,
Yes,
so we've paid for that, right?
yes.
So where is it?
Well, I have to look back at, I keep asking them, and then, so they were waiting for a response that we were supposed to send in, we said, we sent you that response. And so it's, to my knowledge, it's done, and I'll have a status report for you.
Okay, because,
They were actually waiting, they had heard about our land development code update, and they wanted to include it. And when I realized that, I said, no, don't worry about that, let's just get it online.
Yeah, we,
The new code will be months away, so that was one of the delays.
then, but, so once you get your reclassification with the Muni Code people, isn't there a continuing update fee?
There will be a continuing services fee. I'll have to look in to see what that is.
Okay, because we'll have to put that somewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay, because so in other words, once they present us with our online code, and then the next time we do an ordinance, we wing it over to them. And that's what that ongoing fee pays for, is to keep it updated every time we pass an
Correct.
ordinance, they add it in.
Correct.
And we don't have to worry about it, okay. And then with the land development code update, I'm not clear, so is this is that amount being divided between different departments?
No, that's all right here.
Okay, because isn't that supposed to add up to, how much was the total?
The total was only $20,000.
Okay,
We
so-
started that fiscal year before this one. We started last fiscal year. And then so we just left a balance in this year of 5,000, which we've been whittling away.
Okay, because none of that really adds, I'm really confused.
No, I'll have to look at why
It seems like we're missing part of that $20,000. It should have been divided between 2022 and 2023.
yeah, I'll have to look and see what happened there.
Okay, it just seemed like something was missing, and then, so, obviously that project's not done, but we've paid them, 3/4 of it, and we have 5,000 left to pay.
This is not current. We paid a bill recently, so I'll have to check what that amount is.
Okay, all right, just seemed like we didn't allow for full price. Okay, that's all I have on that.
Charles, I do want to ask a question. If we were to talk about, the commission was to talk about us revisiting going to possibly, I think Universal was the one that we had talked about before, and they're the ones now doing Malacca's, permitting.
Mhm.
That would come under the planning and zoning portion, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for the expenditure, we'd have a revenue line added as well.
So we'd have the revenue in, okay. So that's, as we go forward, I think that's something that, I would possibly like us to talk about again, exploring.
We would also have fire inspection as well, be added.
The fire inspection would be added to. I know that permitting is still an issue. Has not been, doesn't seem like it's fixing itself anytime soon. I talked to somebody even today about something, and he said to me right now, he said, you're talking 6 to 10 weeks just to get the permit.
So for you all, now is the right time to make that decision. We go back to Universal. Just to recap, we switched to Universal for building services inspection. And then the county came back and said, well, we also can't do your fire anymore because they have intertwined fire and building the same personnel. So there's no way for them to pull it apart. So we would have to go out and contract also for a fire inspector for our fire marshal services. So we backed out of that contract with Universal and stayed with the county. So if we revisit that, and with them, it was really just a guesstimate of what those revenues would be and expenditures, and we had to try to look at Volusia County's costs, and it was very uncertain, but we went with it. And people that have used them have been very happy. But that's a decision you guys will have to decide, because we'll have to fit it into the budget, make it, and just project is all we can do.
Right, Mayor, I have a question about that. So we had voted to go with Universal, and then you never actually signed a contract. I think you came back to us and you said there would be a negative financial impact. And I don't remember what that negative financial impact would be, but you recommended that we, rescind that change. Was the negative financial impact, did that have to do with the fire inspection?
I don't recall, I have to look it up. It'd be additional fire inspector we'd have to hire, which wasn't included in the scope of service for the engineering firm. Also, we got a very negative impact, response from the county. We were tentatively going to try this out, and they said, if you leave, you can never come back.
Yeah.
And you have to do your own fire.
And you have to do your own fire
Well,
inspection.
It's on the tape somewhere.
Yeah.
Whatever meeting it was, but I remember you explained it at the time. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what you said. But I guess whatever the impact would be to our bottom line, I guess we would need to, know what the total cost will be.
That, yeah. And what I'm hearing from others is that the people that are wanting their permit, that it might cost more for them to get the permit, but it's worth it to them to pay that additional. So that's something we're just gonna have to look at.
And that's something you all wanted, was to know how much is this gonna cost us?
Yeah.
And it depends on use.
Yeah.
So we couldn't tell you, it depends on how many permits come in. And then what's it cost the customer? We do know it's a little more expensive to the customer, but it's faster.
But it's
So-
faster, and they're turning around, I think, in a week over in Malacca. And at that time, they also weren't
They had a
servicing
private
Malacca,
one,
they
yeah.
stopped at Pearson, so it might help too. The cost might go down because they could service us at the same time when they're over here. So, I don't know, we'll have to see what, if that was.
Yeah, well,
But
I
I think
have a
it's
private
something that we should explore. I've heard from numerous people, anytime it's brought up. that
I've heard from some people that are not happy, that it leaves a lot of uncertainty and they can't build.
And so, I think that's where we really want to be friendly, because that's important to us, so. Anyway.
So that would go
something
in here,
else.
yes.
Okay.
So we'll move on to, this one we used, historically it's called general fund government other. So in other communities, it's called city hall. It's kind of a fund not only for this campus, but for a lot of shared expenses. You don't really know which department everybody uses, toilet paper and paper towels or whatever. So those funds, each year I try to strip more out of this and really allocate it where it needs to be. If it's in here, it shouldn't be. So not much change. Look for the main changes. We were down, last year we budgeted 177,000 and this year we're saying 99,000. The big thing is this is where the CRA transfer used to be, and that's the TIF money, the city's portion of the TIF. And it was always listed historically as an expenditure of the general fund. And it's back when Jim Drake was here and came in and said, that's a transfer, that's not an expense. It shouldn't be in your general fund expenses. So you'll see I've got it later down after we finish the general fund budget, then we transfer that money. So we have to account for it, but it shouldn't be shown in this department or this section as an expense of the general fund. So that's the big difference here. This is also historically where the public safety was. The sheriff's office has told us they're not increasing the contract when we renew, which was really great news. So that number is going to stay the same, and we can budget to that number.
Okay, any questions?
Do we have that in writing from the sheriff's office?
Well, we'll have the proposal for you.
What does that do?
April of 2024?
April of 2024.
Yeah. I had reached out and said, we're budgeting now, so we need that figure. And they wrote back and said, there'll be no increase. So then we go on to the fire department. Fire didn't change much. The big sort of thing with the fire department is this program the chief calls volunteer incentives. I'm just gonna show the whole thing here and then go back up. So last year we gave him actually in a budget amendment, we gave him $50,000, and that's what he incentivizes volunteers to come and stay for a number of hours. They get paid better if they stay. And we had to cut that down, I guess, at a budget adjustment to 30,000. We think he's gonna use about 26 this year, but he wants the 50,000 again to try to get more coverage at the station. So we're gonna try to give him that. So whereas last year we budgeted 138.8, that's after the budget adjustment where we took a little bit of that money away. We're coming back for 162,950 this year. We expect him to spend about almost 130 in the current year, but he's continually ramping up. He makes a little note about that in his monthly report, the volunteer hours, the increase that's reflected and so forth. So it's
This has
helped.
been very beneficial,
It's
correct?
beneficial, and yeah, to staff that.
Any questions?
So then we get code enforcement. I think your printout has an error. The salary, it's the wrong figure. It says 17,000. It'd be about 26,300, 26,400 for code enforcement. Last year we did increase her hours to 30 hours a week from 20. And then nothing else is really changing. Last year's budget was 36,885. This year it's 40. And those are, I think, are just the insurance and some other changes. Historically, that was a new department. It had been peeled off from law enforcement. So initially we weren't charging the phone use, internet, the kind of the share of things that were needed to run that department. So now we're adding those into that budget.
For membership and training, should there be more money in there for her membership and training? I know,
She hasn't needed it. She goes to, she's in 2 associations. We're at the bottom of one, southern end of one, and just outside of the other, Volusia. So she goes down to Volusia and she goes up to Jacksonville and for training opportunities, and we've posted some here. But she doesn't prefer to go to conferences and those kind of things, just her preference.
any questions?
Any questions on code enforcement?
No, Mayor, I just would add to that, I would certainly encourage our code officer to take advantage of as much training as she can, because there's always new ways to solve problems.
Yeah.
And we have some problems.
So our public works is basically a streets budget and a parks budget. In streets, we made some changes, and we'll add those footnotes of what salaries we're covering here. Because we had, for instance, Ronald Brandt does both streets and water. I've made him the supervisor and over a lot of streets and parks. He's paid out of water. So we're looking at moving the director position, which is going to be more utilities into the utilities, the water fund, and moving Mr. Grant into streets and parks, because he's kind of over streets and parks. So we're moving around the fund. That's why there's a difference there. It looks like it went down, but we're moving a salary position into water and an hourly position into streets. Other than that, in this department, this is one of those, there's a couple of those opportunities where we actually aren't just operating. There's a tree maintenance budget in there where right now our tree board has had the arborist go out looking at a number of trees. Those expenses will probably occur this year, but in the future year we may need more trees, so I put that at $10,000. And then street repair supplies. So this is actually smaller repairs, potholes, trying to fix some curb inlets, those kind of things. That's money to actually put out to get stuff done. So the rest of it is repairing our equipment and our vehicles and our tools and operating supplies and gas and oil and liability insurance and those kind of things. So overall, that line went up a little bit from last year's request. It came in a little bit more. We asked for 232, 190 came in. We expected to come in about 236. And this year we're asking for 253, 254.
Yeah, because the older your equipment get, the more it costs. more repair.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, right. And ours is
And then they,
really some of them.
and then the parks budget similarly, the changes are just in the liability and so forth, but there are three things in here I wanted to point out. Building repair and maintenance, so actually repairing, building the restroom buildings, the parks buildings. There's equipment repair and maintenance. So I look at that as both the parks equipment and then the equipment at the parks. Historically, when a picnic table broke, we removed it. And then there'd be an empty pad there. So now the effort is to replace them, replace equipment.
What?
A picnic table,
Oh,
things
okay.
like, things that broke were just removed. So this line is where we can go in and hopefully if it falls within the budget, we can replace it. Also operating supplies, so the operating supplies we need to keep our parks nice and usable, so.
We just had a meeting on Better Place Plan funds. And during that meeting, I expressed how I feel we need more people in our public works. We need, at least one more person, if not two, to help maintain everything that's here right now in Crescent City. As we're evolving into a better city,
Mhm.
there's more things to do, I guess is what I want to say.
Sure.
And I don't see any of that reflected here
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on that here in just a moment.
that, okay.
This is, I do want to bring up that, like, when you said the building repair and maintenance, like right now, the gazebo, all our gazebos need work, but Eva Lyons gazebo desperately needs painting. And I know you got a bid for that, so
Oh, but I don't remember, it's like $6,500.
I thought it was 75.
75.
65, 75, yeah,
It's painted.
paint the whole thing, yeah, 'cause
It's intricate,
it's intricate up in there, and then you've got the floor too. The floor's gonna have to be sprayed because they painted it and it's,
so a project like that is a bigger bite. I would recommend using maybe the other funds, like we talked about, for an improvement like that. This would be for smaller, if they're just hitting over a little graffiti or a little, like, I noticed the dog park, one of the railings is now broken off of the little gazebo there, so just fixing that would be building repair and maintenance.
Mayor, I have a question about the gazebo. So part of the problem with the gazebo is that the way with the rafters up there, it's a pigeon roost. Which means that usually the floor and the seats are very dirty. And then Public Works has to go in and clean it. I think it would be wonderful if we could figure out a way to, I don't know, they've tried a couple of things, put the owls up there. I don't know why the chicken wire didn't work.
Have you seen a lot of bird guano on this? I haven't seen much bird poop
I
on
washed for several hours.
it. Because there are a lot of
A couple of
wire and stuff up
month and
there.
a half ago.
Yeah.
I washed for a couple of hours scrubbing that because it was so thick.
I have, but
I've done that twice now, before the Easter one, and then I did it again when we had the prayer in the park. And it was so thick in there, and then you come back and they've done it again.
The whole thing or just that bench area?
It's in the bench area, right there in the middle, kind of, and then in the lower part, in the middle, right in through there, a couple of places in there. So it's thick, and I have to say,
it always,
It's-
it looks, I mean, I walk past it, you know, quite frequently, since that's where the sidewalk goes to get places. And this, so it just frequently looks dirty, and actually, bird guano is very unhealthy. You can get lung diseases from that, so anybody who's cleaning, needs to be careful, stay far away. The other issue I have with the parks, and this has to do with how many pigeons or crows or whatnot are there, Mayor, be careful. Last year, at this budget time, we talked about getting, covers for either a different kind of trash can or trash can covers. Because when food goes into those trash cans, it's just an animal attractor.
Mhm.
And I don't know what happened to that. I don't see different trash cans, and I don't see trash can covers, but I was somewhat dismayed to see, a couple of buzzards in the Eagle Eye Parks. I don't know what park, I don't know what other parks they may be in, because I don't know if there's still a problem in Dexter or if they quit going to Dexter, but, just, open trash cans that people put food in are not helpful to the animal problem.
Well, the new cans at Fletcher that were grant funded have a little roof, a little cover, like a vulture top.
Right, now I haven't been to Fletcher,
Yeah.
but last budget season, Mr. Harris was here and he talked about being able to order tops.
And I'll follow up and see what we haven't done it. We have a new can in stock for Central Avenue that has the cover as well, but we'll look and see. There may have been an issue of fitting our old cans, I'm not sure, but I'll follow up with that.
Well,
Yes, sir.
since we're on the park, what happened on the 4th of July?
It's a mess
To
now.
the park? We had to pull our crews down there and they worked and the bags were piled up everywhere.
We did, we had the crew there, they got it cleaned up pretty short order. Yeah, there was.
Fortunately, it
a lot of work.
happens every 4th of July and every January 1st,
Unless it rained, yeah.
unless it rains. I think last year,
Did they,
I think last year it might have
There were
rained.
so many people that it, well, we can address that another time, but it need to be addressed. It really does.
But, well, just before we forget about it, a quick comment about that, I got calls from somebody who lives on the point, who could see it. I drove down there because I heard the fireworks that went on from about 8 to 10. One January 1st, I had mentioned it in a meeting. I think July 4th is more heavily used. One January 1st, I had mentioned it before in a meeting, and the sheriff had a car down there, and nobody came. So to me, being proactive and preventive, it was really kind of cute. I mean, it was a huge mess. I saw the mess. There were about 50 to 100 people in the park.
Yes, it was.
And, actually, when I went down there, it must have been about 8:30, they thoughtfully placed cones in the road just to warn you that it was going to be very congested on Grand Rondo, and it was. So, anyway, the one time the sheriff put the car down there, there was no activity.
And they did have a car, my understanding, because I got texted that night, I think from the same person that you were being texted by, and spoke to them, and they did have a car down there, and unfortunately, there was some other stuff going on, and he couldn't go in without backup. So they were waiting on backup.
But the problem was, on the January 1st, when they had a car there, it was proactive. In this case, they did not send anybody until there were already a large group of people there, and that's why, once there was a group, one car, has to wait for others.
And I also wanna know, when did they take down there in Harry Banks Park on the basketball court, when did they take the cart and put a mattress on there and burn it all up and act like fools at Harry Banks Park? So what night was that, did that happen?
I don't recall, I think that was weeks ago.
Weeks ago?
Yeah, it was some time ago.
Cause I think those kind of things, I don't understand why those kind of things are happening, why.
And and our crew was great, on the morning of the 5th, when they went to the beach, we're cleaning it up first thing. The only thing, they were kind of, Cecil does the mowing, he's upset of the donuts that were spun in the grass, but if you talk to Ronnie, he's very, kind of circumspect about it. That's just what, he says, my people do, and we cleaned it up the next morning, and it's just sort of what's sold for him. So they cleaned it up, and then people
Is
were
that
able to park.
acceptable for anybody to do, though? It's not.
It's not, the sheriff, the sergeant said they tried to, and some of the people did take their stuff out when they were asked to leave. Some of them did take their stuff out, but he did warn there was quite a bit of stuff in there, so.
Yeah.
The only other thing we do is on those days, you lock up, and we hate to do that for the 4th of July, but at a certain time, we might need to talk about, do we lock up Dexter Park, lock the fence?
One thing I had mentioned for Grand Rondo as a speed thing is there any way that we can, I don't think we can budget it in our budget, but possibly get some type of grant to take and put, I don't know if you wanna put rails, if you wanna put bushes, whatever along Grand Rondo, so that people just can't drive in there and do donuts and do all that damage. I mean, it's a beautiful park. And, you just hate to see it ripped up like that. There's no reason for that. And, it's very disrespectful to the city for people to be doing that.
Right.
Sure,
And,
that's
I mean, when we have our planned events there, we actually watch that so that people are respectful of our property and stuff. And,
You
so
know,
I think we need to, I just think we need to be doing something different than what we're doing, I guess.
we really need, we really need to look at it.
Yes, we do.
Immediately, we don't need to put it in the back burner. We need to put it in front of the burner. I don't know what Palaca does, but I know one thing, they don't have nobody kicking donuts out there on the grass. And I don't know whether it's the fence they got there, the little fence.
Yeah, that's what I mean, that's something.
Or doing it, I don't know but I was really heartbroken when I read on the fifth, after the 4th of July. Cause I asked somebody, I said, well, I thought they had the 4th of July last Saturday for Crescent City down, down there. But they shot firecrackers. I mean, they shot them, and they didn't have no time limit, evidently.
And we can bring you a proposal, what it would be to cordon off
Yeah, well,
the waterfront there.
yeah, well, we need something, because they're gonna spoil it.
Yeah, they're gonna ruin it.
Yes, they're gonna ruin it.
Doing a good job.
Big tie trucks, look like somebody just took a four-wheeler or something, or
They even take those little mini bikes, they get in there on 1 foot and they spin them around. I've
Yeah.
seen them do that.
We haven't had this damage in quite a while, so this is,
Yeah, they were
Kind of an
pretty
annual
active
occurrence,
there
yeah.
for a little while and then
Yeah, they got on, they got by, we kinda drop our guards a little bit this time, and they really
Took advantage.
took advantage of it, I agree.
so this, if you look at the bottom of the Parks and Rec page, you'll see where we have, after total expenditures, we're projecting 2.16 million, which you can see is below revenue. It's showing that there's still 45,900 in revenue. However, then we make the transfer to the CRA of the city's portion of the TIF, and that would put us in the red by about $45,000 with this draft. So that just means we eat into the fund balance. You want to maintain a $1 million fund balance. So what I would do if this were it, if we were right there, I'd go back through and I would trim down all the departments and I'd get that number to 0 instead of the red 44,747. So the cost of adding a public works position is $50,000 for one base pay individual. So if we want to add another $50,000 into the budget, then we'd have to cut out $94,000 out of this budget. Some other things you've talked about, I have a little list here. I mentioned we're increasing our retirement contribution. Last year, Commissioner Banks had talked about having a fund to demolish, pay for demolition of derelict houses. We had to pull that out of the budget last year, and as it turned out, we didn't need it anyway. We've also talked about a historic preservation master plan, a stormwater master plan that was actually in our comprehensive plan to be done by 2011. Both those kinds of plans are very expensive. We talked about a contracted grant writer, either part-time or contractual. I spoke to one, this was early in my tenure here, and they wanted a retainer of $5,000 a month. So that number varies greatly by the service, how good they feel they are, or whatever their track record. If you retain them, if you want to get somebody who only gets paid if they get the grant, they're very rare. Fred Fox and Associates works that way. They have a certain set of grants they do for us, and they're currently working on FERDAP and CDBG for us, so they can't apply for any more for us. And USDA, they kind of work with another firm. USDA said we have too much undesignated revenue funds. So a contracted grant writer would probably need a retainer fee monthly. And I don't know if that would be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 or something. And then they look for grants for us, and then we decide if it was worth it. You've talked about a shared lobbyist. We'd share with Willaca and Pomona Park. We haven't talked much this last year about a fire assessment fee. Last year we talked a lot about it, and Bob, I don't know if you remember what that number was. There's like one attorney who did it for Willaca, and wasn't like $100,000.
It was quite a bit of money, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, so we let that go last year. And then I mentioned deferred maintenance is one of my priorities, is to keep adding those little $10,000 lines in the budget to keep fixing broken lights and replace molded signs, those little things. And then additional public work position, which we talked a lot about at the Better Place workshop, is $50,000. So if your direction is to make that fit, we'll put it into the public works line in parks, and then we'll start cutting elsewhere.
Yes, I have a question about your memo.
Yes.
There's parts that I did not understand. And actually, I don't think I have this page in my papers.
I had this page on, that's it this afternoon, yeah.
Because that was one of my questions to you.
That's the last paragraph of my cover memo.
Right, okay, in your cover memo, and this is very important. I mean, for us to make a policy decision about where we're gonna put money, all those items that you mentioned, and there's some in your memo that aren't mentioned up here, but I really wanted to have those figures. But as well, there was a part that was really confusing. Up in the first paragraph of Charles's memo, it's dated July, the one in our packet. The next to last sentence, it says, the fund balance is significantly over the $1 million limit. I didn't understand.
That's the wrong, limit's the wrong term, but you said you want to keep $1 million in reserve.
Yes,
Fund
I
balance.
got that part. I pretty much understood. You're talking about the $1 million reserve we asked you to have, and feel free to sit down.
Yes, sir.
If I need to talk louder, I'll talk louder. But your memo says the fund balance is significantly over that $1 million amount.
Well, and that's something I can't really talk about today. We're still figuring that out. It's showing 1.6 million in your spreadsheet. And I think that includes some other, funds as well. That's not all general fund, I don't believe, but we're.
Well, okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because my understanding is, and one thing I would like to have for our packets is that final budget that we passed last year. Because if I remember correctly, that final budget we passed last year said at the end of the year, we had $1,500 left over. So when I saw this sentence that said the fund balance is significantly over the $1 million limit, I was just thinking, that doesn't compute. Where would that money come from? And so you're confirming that you don't think that's really gonna pan out. So,
I think we still have $1 million or more.
okay,
I'm trying to get you the exact number.
okay, but,
It'll be an unaudited number at this point.
right, but in other words, that's what we used to call, under Mr. Kennedy, he would call carryover.
Yeah.
Unspent money. So if there is unspent money, that would be something that we could potentially put toward a non-recurring, a one-time only expense. But, I mean, it makes a big difference, especially with the price tag here. Is it gonna be 30,000 or 300,000?
Yes.
So, okay, just wanna make sure I'm understanding correctly, and then basically, also with your memo, in the first paragraph, Charles says, the draft budget is based on keeping the rate of taxation the same. So basically, we would not be doing a rollback, we would be keeping the same knowledge.
That's my recommendation.
Right, so, I don't know. And then, okay, those were questions I have, and I have some priorities or observations that other people might want want to say what their priorities are.
And do we have any other?
Whatever needs to, just get an additional position for all of those.
Commissioner Banks?
Good.
Commissioner Keating?
Okay, so, one thing I think we might want to take a look at that would be helpful for us, and you can thank the League of Cities training class for this. We have a 5-year strategic plan for Crescent City. Hopefully, where we spend money in our budget will somehow track the strategic plan. And I'm hoping that the next time we get together to talk about budget, we would all have a copy of our strategic plan and we would try to see whether we're spending money to accomplish our goals. And if we're not, I mean, either we change our goals or we change our budget. My observation to me, I think if the budget is going to be tight this year, and somebody from the public said this to me, and I thought they said it really well, that we should look at spending money on something that will add revenue to our city. And to me, the most likely thing there is a contracted grant writer, because everybody always says, well, maybe we could do this with grant funds, but we don't have anyone to look for the grants, and we don't have anyone to write the grants. And actually, in our strategic plan, it talks about quite a few things that the way we would do it would be to look for grant funds. So a contracted grant writer, it doesn't obligate you to anything year to year, and it potentially could bring in money for us. And ditto the fire fee. I'm a little confused about how there's only one person in the whole state that will do the fire fee, because we had a fire fee. I mean, can we not just reinstitute the fire fee we had without a study? We have a fire fee.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. That formula that Palaca used is, that guy that does that program has it, I don't know, copyrighted, for lack of a better term, whatever it is, patented. So that's why he's the only one that can do what they did.
But isn't that for an BU? And we had an MSTU, and that money went to the county.
I don't know exactly what it was. It was just, a fee based off of the taxable value of your property.
Well, I think the municipal service benefit unit is a more complicated one to come up with. Just other municipalities, I think, have fire fees. I would really like to know more about that, because we gave up our fire fee. We quit participating in the county's fee, because the decision was made by a prior commission. I participated on it, Mr. Kennedy made the recommendation. I think Commissioner Banks obviously was here then. We quit participating in the county fire fee, and the figure that Crescent City taxpayers paid the total revenue was $70,000. Right, so I don't know, if there's any other kind of fire fee besides the one that takes the $100,000 study, that to me, that'd be worth looking into, because we all used to pay it.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Banks.
Now, Palaca, I just heard this, in this city, that, Palaca, Avalon, Texas is cheaper than Crescent Cities. In some other municipalities, Avalon, Texas is cheaper than Crescent City. Now, Palaca got a special assessment. And that's why some of the reason Avalon, Texas is cheaper.
And their fire fee, they dropped their millage rate when they adopted that.
Right.
Everybody pays, churches pay, everybody.
Yeah, everybody pays. So,
One thing to consider, Commissioner, the fire fee is, my understanding of the history, when we stopped paying that, the county didn't stop paying for what they pay for.
Right.
And so if we reinstituted, it could be a wash. The county goes, okay, now you've got a fee, we're not gonna,
And the county's looking at that
because
anyway.
they look at that everybody here,
And they're
can we
looking
cut
at
this?
it.
We're paying for most of our equipment is paid for by the county, even though we're not in the assessment.
And
So
anytime,
we're
yeah.
kind of enjoying the benefits, without participating. So if we were to get one, now we have revenue, I think for them now, this thing is, okay, now you can cover all this.
You can cover,
It
yeah.
ended up being a wash, so I don't think it would help our long-term position in the budget overall.
That was, yeah, every time you have a conversation with them, anything to do with fire, that's brought up. There's still a lot of,
Okay, but
hurt feelings there from whatever you wanna call it, from that action.
Mayor, if I could, the flip side of that is whatever makes our fire services stronger benefits the county because all the fire departments support each other. So I'm not sure that that's a valid argument that they wouldn't pay for things because we have a fee. If we're a stronger, better fire department, that also benefits the county. So I don't know. But I do know that we are very fortunate to have a part-time fire chief who, to me, brings us a great deal of value, and I'm, a little concerned that he can't be duplicated. I think he has unique capabilities and a very unique dedication. And I just think that we should plan, I think we need to plan for eventualities. I don't know, I would like
That's
to see
something
us
that
look
needs to be
at.
looked at, so we can look at that rather than, okay.
Yeah.
So, and that was, so pretty much my emphasis is, can we review our strategic plan, make sure that we're funding things that fit with our strategic plan? Can we look at, if we're going to do some of these things, look at things that, will bring in potentially additional revenue that apparently we pretty much need. And I understand you don't have the final figures on whatever the fund balance is. So that's my point there.
I think again, Charles, I know this since day one has been an issue that you inherited. We all inherited this. And trying to get through it. Dale, thank you very much. I hope every time I talk to you, you seem like you feel a little more comfortable that we're like coming over almost over the mountain, or we're coming close to getting over the mountain. This is something that, I know you both live with constantly as far as making sure that we're protected and taken care of. And having to deal with that and having seen that and witnessed that every time you got somebody new in there, they wanted things done a different way, and they would change everything around just when, you get comfortable with it the way that one person was doing. That's tough to work under those conditions, so thank you guys for the effort you're putting into making this right for us. So with that, if everybody's done at this time, I'm gonna open up for public comment. If you have any public comment, please come forward, state your name. Karen?
George Miller, 100 Lakeshore Drive, Crescent City. I want to thank the city manager. I'm very encouraged with the work he and Dale have done for full disclosure of finances. The city's first time I've seen this in many, many years. I'm very encouraged and thank you again.
Thank you. Anybody else? With that, no other comments, I'm gonna close out public comment. And if anybody else has anything else, then I'll go ahead and launch on this workshop. Anything else, Charles? You good?
We just have a hard copy for you. Probably have just a little tweak to the language on this resolution.
Okay,
The pink highlight is what's different than the one copy in the back.
But Charles, you did say you were gonna try to give us a number.
Yeah, next time you see the budget, it'll have lines and numbers. Notes.
Totally lost.
Yeah.
I got everything looking.
We're creatures of habit. We are, I told him that before he went in here. We are kind of creatures of habit. So with that, that's what we're used to. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the workshop. Thank you all very much.
Here, I went looking for a ruler. I don't have like a foot, all I have is a yardstick.